Tokenization simply is you're taking any asset, real, intangible, IP, whatnot, representing its ownership as a public-private key pair and tracking such ownership on the blockchain. Tech-wise, it is brilliantly simple. The lazy way to do it, as I would call it, is token trust tokenization, in which you would place the asset in a token trust. I do have samples of that trust on my table. That trust is controlled by the bearer of the private key, and the grantor is the same person as the trustee and the beneficiary, so effectively it is the equivalent of the bearer of such private key being able to own and manipulate the asset as if they did personally, yet be able to transfer it on the chain. Now, this approach is universally recognized, but the fundamental problem with it is we are creating a new corporate entity, which trust-busting jurisdictions such as New York City, East Texas, or the entire state of Georgia have been known to break apart these trusts when they don't like it. The proper way to do tokenization is directly, in which right on the title of whatever asset it is, house, car, whatnot, you write the bearer of the private key corresponding to an smart contract token, public key, etc. Now, this is not, unfortunately, universally recognized because it requires cooperation from the title entity. For example, if I were to go to the DMV and ask to retitle my car using a private key, I'll probably be laughed out of the room. The other problem with this is that no one outside of the crypto community is too familiar with these tokens. If I'm pitching a tranche of tokenized stock to a PM at a hedge fund or even grandma and grandpa at their 401k, they have the option between seeing a piece of technology, the SIPC system, the securities industry, that they just call their brokerage and it just works, versus if they lose their wallet, if they lose their private key, they lose their 401k. So most people would rather stick with indirect tokenization, even though direct tokenization is explicitly protected by the contracts clause. The scenario, unfortunately, as it is there is this new technology out on the market, and the general public has more faith in how the securities industry works. That is why the premise of my point is that mass adoption of tokens, crypto, and tokenization requires technological features beyond what securities can physically do. We need more features that are impossible, or technically impossible to replicate in the traditional securities industry. The first one in my application being, I allow the buyer to modify their financial instruments post-issuance. I do this in the synthetic commodities I take public. Synthetic commodities, let's say I want to speculate on the price of, let's say, Gulf oil being refined in Portsmouth. It's a combination that would never happen in real life, but I can purchase Gulf oil futures, tokenize it, the transport and tariff contract of the shipping, tokenize it, Portsmouth refinery rights, tokenize that, put that together in a bond. Now, as the buyer, if I see that this combination won't work out, unlike a regular security, I don't have to take a loss. What I can do is I can resplit up that token into the 3 individual contracts and resell them off to people that are using that, thereby not really taking such loss. The other perk of such tokenization technologically is the instant verification of assets and reserve ratios. The white paper that I have on the table of Standard Coin is a basket option token that takes the entirety of the Fed CPI index, matches them to a set of assets. We tokenize these assets and put them into a basket token, which rebalance themselves. Thereby, the holder of one standard coin effectively gets to track the index of inflation without having to argue which single commodity would track inflation better. Why do that when you can track the entire inflation index? Now the challenges, the first one I have maintained, are cultural and technical. Look, at the end of the day, if we are talking to average Joe and we need them to purchase these tokens, we need a proper custodial framework such that those who don't want to self-custody can still interact with these tokens, and just because they lose their password or private key does not mean that they lose their entire portfolio. Solutions have been to, let's say, insure this private key, but even getting insurance has been a bit tricky. SIPC insurance is not going to cover tokens. Legal challenges include, well, the entire SEC. There is a reason that I largely operate under either the 3C7 or private offerings, because registration requirements are a lot more lax if I don't have to deal with general solicitation. However, secondary sales of these tokens, as we've seen with much court precedent, is unregulated. So I can point you to an exchange where you can buy these tokens. The third major challenge that we have to solve is, to me, the most interesting problem, the mathematical, sociological problem of proper governance. Do we make these, how immutable do we make these tokens? Because if there's a software bug, we cannot go back in and fix it, versus if we make it too democratic, the wrong people can vote the wrong way and effectively rug pull the token by democracy. At the end of the day, we're all on the same page. We want more adoption of crypto, more use of tokens, because ultimately that lets us control our own assets without having to deal with centralized entities. But in order to get general adoption, it is imperative that we meet and overcome these challenges. Otherwise, we're just going to be a niche technology without any general application. Thank you very much. Any questions?
I've got a few minutes. Let me think. I guess a general question, just as far as topic is the future of financial instruments. What do you see? Do you see any kind of government obstacles or barriers that need to be cleared out of the way in order to kind of secure kind of a better future opportunities for cryptocurrency adoption?
I mean, two major obstacles. The obvious elephant in the room is the SEC. We need better guidelines to be able to see which regulatory framework to follow. I still maintain that the SEC is not taking a position on purpose, because they can pick and choose the projects they like and sue the projects they do not like. But the other main challenge, like I talked about, direct tokenization. I need to be able to go into places like the DMV and retitle my car to a private key without being laughed out. I need to be able to title my stocks as such. I view tokenization as the successor to back when we had paper stocks and bonds, and we could just trade these papers over the counter without dealing with any third party or any government interference. But in order to do that, like I said, government needs to cooperate with direct tokenization, and we need guidelines to learn how to operate under.